All right, people. Next up is the presentation phase of the sales cycle. And so this is going to happen after you do a discovery call and you discover all the pains that you can solve for, and then you schedule the meeting at the end of the call, and then you say, okay, we're going to have a presentation, and you make sure you bring all the decision makers on this presentation. And so when you're doing the presentation, you want to make sure that everybody that needs to be in that room is in the room. And so a presentation can either be done in person or online if you're sharing your screen, or if it's just a phone call. So every sale is different. If you're like a consultant and you offer services, you may not have a presentation that people can physically see. On the other end, if you're selling a software, then it makes sense to do a screen share and show them exactly how the software works. Or if you're going in person, you can kind of show them on a screen. So every sale is going to be different, and so you just got to know what is best for your style, for your product or service. Now, the only goal of a presentation is to get the order and confirm the close. So what I mean by this is that when you are going into the presentation phase, because you should have already qualified them to be a good buyer, you already actually got the close. You just need to get the order and confirm it. So again, when you're doing the presentation, all the check boxes are already marked. You just need to do this last step to confirm the close. So here is how the presentation is gonna go down. Once you enter the presentation phase, you're not closing anymore. And like I said before, you already closed the deal. You just have to reconfirm it after you show them what you got. Now, you already got the sale. You just need to confirm it. And if you don't feel confident in this, and you don't feel confident that you already got the sale, then that means the discovery call wasn't strong enough. And so what I mean by this is that the most important part about selling is listening. And it's really that discovery call. By identifying all their pains and their budget and decision-making process, and knowing that you can solve their problem, they should already be a good fit for your product or service. But if you don't know these things and you don't feel confident going in the presentation, then you need to work on the discovery portion of the sales cycle. So now that you're in the presentation section of the process, setting the expectations is the close. And so here's what I mean by that. So the first thing you want to do is you go over the pain, you summarize everything that you talked about during the discovery part. Then you go over the budget and the money and how much exactly it's going to cost for your product or service. Then you're going to go over the decision-making process in, how the other company or individual makes a decision at their company. And you want to make sure that nothing has changed since the last time you spoke with the prospect. And if something has changed, you want to address those changes head on. And a lot of times, if a lot of big changes happen, then you might have to redo the discovery phase and ask them more questions. And something I'll share with you is that just because you show up to do a presentation, it doesn't necessarily mean you actually have to give the presentation right there. Because if a lot of things change, then you have to understand what those changes are and adjust your presentation and reschedule it. So when I mean by, setting expectation is a close, is that, when you're going over the pain, the budget, decision-making process, and nothing has changed, you already know that they're going to be a good fit for your product or service. So you're not closing anymore. You're just letting the prospect close themselves. When you're setting the expectations for the presentations, one thing you want to know is you want to get an agreement that after the presentation is over, you're either going to get a yes or no, and you're not going to accept a maybe. And that's because there should be no reason for why someone will give you a maybe, because you already went over all the important key things in the decision-making process. So here's some presentation guidelines you should think about when you are about to give your presentation. So you want to only present items that relate to solving the pain of the prospect, and that pains are going to be the 3 to 5 pains that you discovered during the discovery process of the sales cycle. You don't want to surprise your prospect with any new pains. So this is not the time to use anything new. You just want to get the pains that they gave you already and solve for them. And whenever possible, let the prospect touch the product or use the product if it's something physical or something that they could play with on their computer or their phone, or if it's an app. You want to let the prospect interrupt. When the prospect asks you a question right in the middle of a presentation, go ahead and just stop presenting and start listening. And because you want to be, listening to the prospect and addressing exactly what they want to hear. And some more guidelines is that you don't have to finish the presentation presentation if it seems like they're ready to buy. You could close right in the middle of a presentation if you catch that vibe. And of course, you always want to work off the prospect's responses. Whatever they say, you want to work with that and build that into your presentation. And don't be afraid to abort. If things are going poorly and the prospect's not interested, and you're not doing a good job in presenting, you could totally call off the presentation and come back another time. So here's how we're going to structure your presentation. There's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And, it's very simple, beginning, middle, end, and then you're going to close the deal at the end of the presentation. Now, if your sales cycle is longer, if you're doing a business development deal and it might take months, you can go ahead and schedule up the follow-up, like negotiations and, contracts and stuff like that. But for the most part, if your sales cycle is shorter, you can pretty much close it after the presentation. But if you can't close it during that presentation, at least you can know what to do to schedule the next meeting and move forward with the deal. Now, at the beginning of the presentation, here is what's going to happen. You're going to open with addressing the pains you will solve. You're summarizing the 3 to 5 pains, the specific dollar amount you need to solve for those pains, and basically the budget that the prospect already gave you, and an agreement to get a yes or no at the end of the presentation and never a maybe. And so by saying these things right in the beginning and setting the right expectations, the prospects know what you're doing, you know what you're doing, everybody is on the same page. Now, the middle of the presentation, after you get this agreement that everyone's on the same page, you want to transition with a compelling opening. So you want to use a story, a personal experience, a relevant statistic, anything you can use to tell a story to transition into you talking about your product or service and getting your prospect involved in the presentation. And so once you tell that kind of story, then you want to go into their pains and solve them one by one. And you'll notice the way I am structuring the pitch, it's not about what to say and say this, say that. Really, all you really need to do is get their pains that you already discovered and just solve them. This is the most effective way I've seen salespeople close deals, because you don't need to have this grand pitch, because this isn't a pitch competition. This is a selling process. And if you really know what's making them hurt and you're just solving it, people are willing to pay you money. Think about it like this. If somebody is dying and you had the cure to whatever sickness that they had, they will pay you anything to solve that. You don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to use any techniques. All you have to do is solve for their pains. How you solve for their pains is you want to use this ISB method, and it stands for issue, solution, benefit. So the issue, you bring up the pain, whatever pain they told you, then you give your solution to how your product or service solved for that pain. And then after the solution, you give the benefit, which is the significance and the why your solution is important for the prospect. So it's not enough just to tell the prospect how you're going to solve their pain. You have to explain to them why it's important, why it's better than everybody else, and it's going to stick a lot more. So as you go down the list, 3 to 5 pains, just issue, solution, benefit, issue, solution, benefit. You just keep repeating that process, and it's going to register in the prospect's mind, and they will be more likely to like your product or service. Now, an example of the ISB method is, so when I was working at Oracle, I sold HR software. So a lot of problems that people had was the HR software for a lot of hospitals in my territory, we just weren't that great. And the HR staff had to manually process resumes. So they would literally process thousands of resumes by hand. And so the solution is Oracle recruiting software basically automates that entire process. So they no longer have to spend hours doing that. So the benefit is that they save a lot of time from doing the manual work, and basically they can reallocate their employees to do other tasks that aren't so repetitive and have them be happy and grow as a company. So issue, solution, benefit. So whatever you're selling, you just want to think about what are the problems that the prospect have, how do you solve for that problem, and why is it important? Issue, solution, benefit. Here is how you are going to end the presentation, and this is how you're going to close the deal. So when you're about 2/3 through your presentation, what you want to do is you want to take the prospect's temperature. And so what that means is on the scale of 1 to 10, how close are they saying yes for you to close that deal? So literally 2/3 in your presentation, you want to just pause for a second and you say, hey guys, I know I've been presenting, we solve a couple of the pains, but I just want to get a read of what you guys are feeling. On a scale of 1 to 10, how close are you guys to moving forward with this deal? And so basically they're going to give you numbers, right? So if it's less than the 5, which is typically a negative response, you could counter back with saying, I get the feeling you have no interest in my product or service. Is that fair to say? If they say, whatever they say, then ask, what would it take to make that number higher? Basically, whatever they say, they might say, we're not interested. Or they might say, yeah, we're kind of interested, but we're not sure. then you want to just ask them, what would it take to make that number higher? And so you want to keep figuring out what you need to do to get to a 10. And so the trick behind this is that you're not guessing what it takes to get them to a 10. You're literally just pausing and you're asking them what they need to see. So by asking them what they want, you can deliver on that, and it's a lot more easier to get them to close the deal themselves. Now, if they answer a number between 5 to 7, what you want to do is you want to continue the presentation and take their temperature again later. So typically what a 5 to 7 means is that they are interested, but they just need to see the rest of the presentation and how you can solve for their pains. Now, if it's going to be an 8 or above, what you want to say is, well, what do you need to see to get to a 10? And so they're going to tell you exactly what they want to see, and then you're going to show them that, and then they're going to get to a 10. If they just give you a 10 right off the bat, just ask them, okay, well, what would you like to do now? They're going to tell you what they're doing. So they're going to be like, well, we're 10 out of 10. We're ready to buy. And they're going to tell you what the next steps to make that buying process. The trick behind this temperature close is that you're basically letting the prospect close themselves, and then you get out of the way. Essentially, you ask them, give me a number 1 to 10. How likely are you willing to buy? Whatever number they give you, you have a response and exactly what to say afterwards. And what's going to happen is they're going to tell you exactly what they want to hear, and then you're going to feed them back, and you're going to say, okay, well, you said that you want to see this. I'm going to show you this exactly, and then they're going to get to that 10. Basically, you just keep talking and going back and forth until they actually get to that 10 during that presentation. And then when they get to that 10, you just say, well, okay, what would you like to do now? In this situation, you're not asking for the close directly. And that's the secret behind this technique. Because you're not asking them directly, you're asking them instead, what would you like to do now? And then they're going to close themselves. People don't like to be closed, but they love to buy. So by asking them what they would like to do, they're going to say, okay, well, now we would like to, get the contract out, or now we need to do this or that. And so whatever it is, you go along with it, and then the prospect will close themselves. And so that's it. It's simple as that. Getting the prospect to close themselves is just asking the question of what they would like to do now, go through the steps. Now, if you close right there, then great. You finished your sales cycle and you got the sale. But if you have a longer sales cycle and they're going to tell you like, oh, now we have to check in with procurement and blah, 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 we have to sign these contracts, then your sales cycle is going to extend. For the sake of this course, the process is essentially going to be the same, where you're going to set the expectations and you're going to keep moving forward with the deal process. And so every deal at this point is going to be different, because every customer is going to tell you different things. And so from there, you have to use the elements that I showed you throughout this course in this section to navigate through what the next process will be, whether it's negotiating price like we covered, or doing another demonstration with different people. You have all the tools that you need to freestyle and continue your sales cycle and build out your sales process. So I gave you all the fundamentals. So even if your sales cycle extends beyond this point, you can use all the things that you learned, mix and match, and then move forward to close the deal.